Hello, my name is David Kilton. I am the lead for Interpretation, Education, and Visitor Services for the National Park Service at Pearl Harbor National Memorial. We are here at Pearl Harbor National Memorial. Behind me you can see the Arizona Memorial, which is the main attraction for us in the National Park Service. You can also see the battleship Missouri, and I'll talk a little bit more about the significance of those two locations just here shortly. Here at Pearl Harbor National Memorial, as part of the National Park Service, our mission is to protect and preserve this location as one of 400 units that tells the unique and significant stories that make up the United States and our history. Some of the beautiful locations like Grand Canyon, but also some of these tragic, difficult stories and stories of ultimate victory as well, which really starts with one of the aspects of what Pearl Harbor is. So Pearl Harbor on the morning of December 7th, 1941 is where the Empire of Japan, in a surprise attack, came and would attack the whole island of Oahu, but specifically the main targets would be right here in the harbor. Across the way here, where you can see the battleship Missouri floating today, is where the ships of the line, the Pacific Fleet of the United States, would have been lined up. There would have been 8 battleships along what was known as Battleship Row, this area right across the way here. All 8 of those ships would have been heavily damaged or sunk that morning, along with one other ship, a formal battleship that was on the other side of Ford Island, the USS Utah. With the attack of those ships and the attack of Pearl Harbor and the island of Oahu, the United States would officially declare war on Japan, and shortly thereafter, within the week, declare war on Germany and Italy, and enter into the war officially into combat. With that, the United States would be engaged in the war both in Europe and here in the Pacific, and one of the rallying cries throughout the war would be "Remember Pearl Harbor," and this would get many individuals to sign up to actually join the armed forces, but also for many other experiences like tin drives and aluminum drives, making uniforms, all these things to help support the war effort. Here at Pearl Harbor, we welcome 1.7 million visitors a year. With that, we have major commemorations around the anniversary of the attacks in December, in the week and weekend of December 7th. We also work with our partners to commemorate and honor other things. Right across the way again, here we have the USS Missouri. On the deck of that battleship is where, after the end of first the victory in Europe that would happen early in 1945. Actually, we will be honoring that 80th anniversary in just the next few weeks. But they would continue to fight in the Pacific until September and August, when there would be the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and then eventually the ultimate surrender of Japan, ending the war. On the deck of the Missouri is where the Emperor of Japan would sign the treaty to end the war. There will be commemoration events connected with the Missouri and others of our partners, including the American Battle Monuments Commission, signifying the end of the war, both victory in Europe and victory in Japan. But since our story is more the start of the war, we don't have quite a big ceremony or commemoration for that, but we will support our partners in the ways we are able. We also get a lot of delegations. Actually, just earlier this weekend, we had a French delegation. We work very closely with our allies and support their efforts. And one of the things that's really part of our story here is the story of peace and reconciliation. Although that war had so many tragedies and such a dividing factor to it, we're not still fighting that war today. And some of the most amazing opportunities that I've had is having delegations from Japan, from Germany, come and pay their tribute and respect here. Those that were our most staunch enemies during World War II are now some of our greatest allies, and it is a great opportunity for us to tell those stories, remember them, honor them, but also reflect on them, on the decisions we have to make today, and move forward hopefully in peace and reconciliation. Yes, so our location is a museum. We have 2 museums right here on ground where you can actually learn the kind of the events that would lead up to the attacks on December 7th, 1941, the events that happened that day and what would happen in the aftermath, including Hawaii, which was not a U.S. state yet, a U.S. Would actually enforce military law here in Hawaii, and there would be a lot of things that would happen because this was the staging point for a lot of the events that would happen in the Pacific War. We tell those stories, we commemorate different aspects of those stories, and even as people come here, learning about, reflecting on those stories, how they connect with them today, and even forging out again with our partners. We just within the last year and a half established a partnership, a sister park relationship with Hiroshima Peace Park, which tells a very different story with the bombing of Hiroshima. But both of our stories want to educate. We also want to seek out in peace and reconciliation. So we have forged a partnership with them to try to move forward with those efforts. After 80 years, over 80 years now, from when the USS Arizona sank on the morning of December 7th, it took fuel. It was fully fueled, actually over 1 million gallons of fuel that was in the ship when it sank within 10 minutes. So that fuel went down with it and was trapped in compartments, slowly leaking out of openings as things have happened over time. Maybe some of those openings have widened and things like that, but we monitor what happens with that oil. We get anywhere from 1 to 10 quarts a day, depending on conditions. For a time prior to the last of the USS Arizona survivors passing, there was a folktale about that those were the tears of the fallen, and that those tears would stop when the last survivor passed. Well, April of last year to 2024, Lou Conter, the last survivor, did pass, but the oil still leaks up to this day. As I said, we do monitor it. It has a very minimal impact on the marine life. In fact, the marine life is doing better now than it has been in years past. And I think some of that is because of efforts that have been made by the Navy and others to clean up the harbor. But if it ever starts to leak up at a higher rate, we might not need to do anything. But as of right now, we just monitor. We don't want to send anybody down into the ship and risk their lives or to actually dishonor those that we honor with the memorial. So we have not gone in to remove that oil at this time. So without being too gruesome about it, those that were on the ship were basically incinerated. The blast was so significant. When a bomb hit the ship, it went down multiple levels and then detonated with the ammunition stores, setting off an even bigger blast, which tore through the ship. The force and the heat from that blast was so great that it would have incinerated most of those that were in the ship. So bodies trapped in the ship is not, but we consider them interred in the ship, and that is their eternal resting place. So we consider them as part of the ship and the crew that is in eternal service. So yes, so the white monument you see out across the way is the USS Arizona Memorial. If you go on to that memorial, as you walk across it, in the back you will see the list of the 1,177 names. It also has 45 other names of former crew members that survived the attack, that at the end of their lives chose to be cremated and have their remains interred in the ship. So they have been interred in the ship as well. When they were looking at building this memorial, almost immediately after the attack, the United States military started to try to salvage and put the ships back into operation. In fact, of the 21 ships that were heavily damaged and sunk, 18 of them would go back into military service and take part in World War II. The 3 that wouldn't would be the USS Arizona, the USS Oklahoma, that would have been where the Missouri is today on that morning, and the USS Utah that is still in the water on the far side. The Arizona, pretty quickly they saw, because the blast had split the keel, basically broken the back of that ship, that they couldn't put it back into war service. And also with all those that had passed, they decided we're going to make it a war grave and leave it in the water. With that, they also put a plaque, made it a memorial, but then they wanted to make something more significant. So they put out to try to get different designers that would want to take part in that service. An Austrian designer and architect by the name of Alfred Price would actually win the bid to build the memorial. So as he put out his design, they needed help raising funds. So yes, Elvis Presley actually did a charity concert actually to raise funds to provide for the finishing of the memorial right here on Oahu in Block Arena. And when he made that concert, it raised a significant amount of the funds so that they eventually could get the project completed and build the memorial that would actually be dedicated in 1962 on Memorial Day. So we will actually have a Memorial Day commemoration honoring all those that served and those that lost their lives specifically in the war. And so we'll have some commemorations for that at the end of the month of May. So again, as Pearl Harbor National Memorial, we are a location that is open basically all but 3 days of the year. We get visitors from all around the world, and we hope as they come to this site they have an opportunity to remember, to learn more about the story. Something that's really interesting, even within the United States, there's a lot of history students coming up through school. They'll learn about World War II. Often they learn a lot more about the European theater. This is an opportunity to learn more about what happened in the Pacific. And all those stories combined, they tie together, and learning about the global scale and the impact of what this is part of our mission too. And we hope individuals that come out here can come, they can learn, they can pay their respects, and hopefully move forward, as I mentioned, with that peace and reconciliation and those efforts to try to learn from what has happened in the past and hopefully make decisions where we will not have things like this happen in the future. Sorry, no, I was just helping you. No, you're good. I was just helping you get over that hump.
Let's just take this on board, or
yes. No, you're good. Totally can take it all the way across. Morning. Morning.
We're heading across the water. I'm going to give you a little bit more history, what occurred here on December 7th by telling you the story of an individual that got to experience it firsthand. To help you understand what I'm talking about, as we head out across the water, look down the shoreline to most of your left, you're going to see a bunch of cranes lining the harbor. Similar to what would have been here in 1941. Those cranes are used to load and unload supplies onto the ships when they're here in port. Also, if they're making any repairs on the ships, they can use those cranes to move some of the heavy machinery and parts that they need to do that. On the morning of December 7th, 1941, a civilian crane operator by the name of George Walters reported to work to operate one of those similar cranes that we will see today. He thought he was going to have a normal work day like he had had many days before, but things turned out much differently. In his raised crane tower, he basically was able to have front row seats to watch the attack on Pearl Harbor occur before his eyes. And as things got more and more intense that morning, he couldn't just sit by and watch. He felt he needed to be involved and help out. So what he started to do was use the knowledge and resources he had to be able to help other dock workers like himself there along the shoreline, but also the service members. So at first what he started to do with the USS Pennsylvania, one of the major targets, another one of the battleships sitting in dry dock right next to his crane, is he started to swing around the big boom or arm of his crane to block line of sight, shielding and protecting that battleship, the USS Pennsylvania. Now the Pennsylvania was hit, strafed, and did take damage that morning. Not as significant as the other battleships that were the main targets, but definitely to the point that it did have to have repairs before it could go back into war service. During the second wave of the attack, George Walters started to do something quite different, because by that point, he saw that service members had started to mount a defense. They grabbed rifles, they grabbed machine guns, they manned the anti-aircraft guns even right there on the USS Pennsylvania. So now what he started to do, with his clear line of sight up in that raised crane tower up above the smoke and the flames that was filling a lot of the harbor. As he started to move around that big arm now to mark where the next line of attacking Imperial Japanese planes was coming in. At first, members of the Pennsylvania's anti-aircraft gunnery crews reported that they were frustrated. They thought as he was moving around that big arm of that crane, he was blocking line of sight. But eventually they caught on to what he was doing and they started to concentrate their fire in the direction he was pointing with that arm. Because of that, the Pennsylvania's anti-aircraft gunnery crews were able to shoot down 3 of the Imperial Japanese planes. And they would make sure to reach out and that he would receive recognition for his bravery and his actions. So eventually George Walters received commendation from the U.S. military as a civilian for his actions that morning. Ladies and gentlemen, this is just one of the stories that we tell here every day. We encourage you to connect with more. As you're here on the memorial, talk with the ranger, ask him questions, go back, watch the film, explore the museums. Learn about these names and stories. Take them home and tell others why we remember Pearl Harbor every day. Thank you, folks. Please remain seated until we secure the ramp, and I'll tell you that it is free. You are free to disembark, and we ask that you do not stop to take pictures or video as you are getting off the ramp onto the memorial. Once you're on the memorial for the full time there, and as you're coming back off the memorial, you can take pictures and videos that type. Just hold off as you're getting onto the memorial. Thank you, folks.
So Alfred Price did design this memorial specifically to make sure that multiple aspects, one, that it would not actually touch the ship that marks the location of the loss of life, with over 900 of those individuals never being able to recover eternally, resting at this location as the site of their loss of life. But also some of the symbolism within the structure is significant. One of the things that stands out is there's high points on either end, which he first wanted to have for some of the values that the country, the United States, stands for, that he appreciated, values of a more peace-loving country that hoped to encourage that not just within their country but with others as well. Then the center comes down to a low point right over the battleship, which was the low point of the trauma and the horror of war, but also the attacks and the loss that happened right at this location. But then eventually coming back to another high point, which would be the efforts that we're seeing through to ultimate victory, not just for the United States, but for our allies and for the world to hopefully reach out and to come to peace going forward, and a seeking for that peace. This location, as we can see through the dedicated plaques here, once again tell of its dedication on Memorial Day 1962. Tells a little bit of the history there. You also have 21 openings as you go along through this center gallery area. Those 21 openings, there are two significances that have been brought forward with that. One, there were 21 ships that were heavily damaged and sunk that morning, but also a 21 gun salute that will often be offered in memory of the fallen that are done at military services within the United States. So those 21 holes can symbolize both of those things. As we come over here, you can come and see aspects of the actual sunken ship. This right here, this large round structure, is the base of one of the gun turrets, one of the large battery guns, gun turret 3. A lot of the things off the USS Arizona that they could salvage and reuse instead of having to rebuild from scratch would be removed and reused for those purposes. The 3 of the gun turrets, that's what would have happened with those gun turrets, is being removed, reused for other purposes. Some for defense around the island. One of the guns was actually eventually put on one of the other battleships to replace its worn out gun. If we continue forward down here, we will be able to see what is called the shrine room, where you actually will see the list of all the names of the fallen that occurred that morning. So these two benches in the front mark the names of 45 other crew members that survived the attack on the morning of December 7th, but at the end of their lives chose to be interred in the ship. So they were cremated and had their remains placed into the ship to join their former shipmates and be interred in the ship for eternity and be here with them. So the last one, as you can see here, was done in 2021, actually the evening of the 80th anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th of 2021. Mr. Milhorn would choose to have his family inter his remains into the ship, and the National Park Service, working with the United States Navy, would help to provide for that service to be able to happen. I'm going to point out another part of the symbolism of the site. If you look at these cutouts on either side, those are abstract designs of what Alfred Price appreciated as the tree of life, which has symbolism in a lot of different cultures, some religious, some cultural significance, and different nations and peoples. Ultimately, what he was inspired by is, if you look, you see the central kind of stone structure is the trunk of a tree, with the branches coming off on either side. Those cut out squares, leaves, and down at the bottom are the roots. And from the symbolism of from the roots of the past comes new life and new hope for the future. That's really what he was hoping to push forward with this design that you can see. One of the things that's very unique and he appreciated about what this would do is at different points of the day, as the sun will pass over, and different seasons of the year, different names along the wall will be illuminated and honored as the sun comes through those openings and lights up the wall. If you want me to talk about the Missouri. So across here you can see the USS Missouri. So on the deck of that ship was where the Emperor of Japan in Tokyo Bay would have signed the treaty after the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki to officially end the war. So after May 8th, victory in Europe was a great day. There was celebration throughout the world, but definitely within the United States, but there was still work to be done to reach ultimate victory. And in the Pacific would be a focus for months after that, until eventually with these island hopping attacks and the campaigns throughout the Pacific and the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki would signal the point where Japan would go ultimately surrender and agree to those peace terms and end the war. But right on the deck of this ship is where that would happen. Just here in the foreground, as a little aside, you can also see a restoration project. As the National Park Service, we're trying to preserve these locations, the stories, the history, and the events, not just for those that can visit today, but for generations to come. So these mooring keys, which is what the ships would have anchored off to on that morning, having usually two ships tied side by side per each pair, have deteriorated over time, and so they are currently working on this to restore it. They will leave any damage that was sustained during the attack, but other damage of weathering and things that have occurred over the 80 years, they are going to restore to make them look like what you see on those two farther mooring keys that have already been restored in the past years. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the United States Navy
and the National Park Service. We want to thank you for coming to Pearl Harbor National Memorial and specifically taking the time to come to the USS Arizona Memorial today. As we head back, I'd like to tell you a little bit more history, and one of the things that to start is it is part of our mission working together to preserve these locations for you all to visit today, but also for individuals that will come in the future. Telling the stories that led up to the attack, the events that happened on December 7th, 1941, and the events that would follow, including all the way up to our opportunity to reflect on these stories and seek peace and reconciliation within our lives today. I want to tell you two stories that came together here, specifically focusing on that peace and reconciliation as we head back over to the visitor center area. The first individual I want to tell you about is a man by the name of Richard Fisk. He was a Marine bugler on the West Virginia that would have been just down from the Arizona going further out towards the mouth of the harbor on that morning. He had stepped out to play morning colors when his ship would also be hit by a bomb. Not to the same devastating effect of what would happen to the Arizona, but definitely with a significant enough impact that it threw him from the deck of the ship out into the waters of Pearl Harbor. He would then have to swim around burning fuel and through this crude bunker oil that had leaked out of the ship, so it was almost like tar, to find safety on Ford Island. He would then spend the rest of the day in a small boat pulling individuals out of the water. Some of those were individuals like him that had been either thrown or had jumped from their ships and were needing to find safety. Some of those were injured individuals. Some of those were the bodies of the fallen. Because of his experiences here at Pearl Harbor and also continuing through the remainder of the war, serving in the Pacific Theater, including being at the Battle of Iwo Jima, Richard Fisk would develop a pretty severe bias and even hatred towards individuals of Japanese ancestry that he would carry with him for decades. And so eventually he had an experience very similar to what you all just had, paying his respects on the Arizona Memorial when he would see a woman of Japanese ancestry come and lay a floral tribute at the base of that shrine room wall in tears. It touched his heart and he wanted to hear her story. So he went up and through a translator found out that she had lost a dear loved one that was fighting for the Empire of Japan in the war. And because of the tragedy that she had experienced with that loss, she felt the loss of any life was tragic, and she wanted to come out and pay her respects out here at Pearl Harbor, come to see this site. It touched his heart. It softened some of that wall of hatred that he had formed. So eventually he agreed to meet another individual at the 50th anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor. So he came out here and right here on the grounds agreed to meet another man by the name of Zenji Abe. Zenji Abe was a bombardier serving for the Empire of Japan on the morning of December 7th. So up in one of those planes dropping bombs. And he felt, because, like several other of the individuals from his country, that because the Empire of Japan's declaration of war had not been received by the United States before the attack on Pearl Harbor, that their acts were treasonous. And so he wanted to come out, pay his respects, and come to grip with the reality of what his actions had caused that morning. So those two individuals agreed to meet. They came together on one of the buildings right here on this complex. And when they came into the room with each other for the first time, there was a moment of quiet. And then after that quiet, they would almost simultaneously salute one another. And then they would go up and start to talk with each other, meet each other. As they shared their stories with each other, they felt that they had no animosity. They didn't hold a grudge because they were basically the flip sides of one coin. They were soldiers doing a soldier's job that morning, following orders. So they didn't hold any animosity. In fact, they developed a respect for one another that formed a greater bond. In fact, on that day, they ripped a dollar bill in half, since they were the two parts of one story, and they committed that they would carry their half of the dollar bill in their wallet for the rest of their lives. They would eventually agree to come out and meet each other again and again at future commemorations. And as they formed this bond that became a brotherhood, a friendship, as they met later in life, they would be in tears once they got to see their friend, their brother once again.
And as they got later and they couldn't come to as many commemorations, they would agree that they would make sure that they would send 2 roses out for the commemorations, even if they weren't able to be there, and that 1 rose would be placed at the base of the shrine room wall during the commemoration for the fallen American lives, and 1 would be placed for the fallen Japanese lives. Ladies and gentlemen, if these 2 gentlemen that lived through the horror and trauma of war could find peace and reconciliation in their hearts, hopefully we can be inspired by their legacy and their stories to find peace and reconciliation in our lives with the events and the things that we face. I want to thank you for coming out here to Pearl Harbor National Memorial. Hope you have a memorable rest of your day. And in just a minute, once we secure these ramps, you will be free to disembark. Please remain seated until we get those ramps secured. Thank you, folks.
C'était Léopold de LDC.News de PearlHarbor à Hawaï, à l'approche du 80e anniversaire de la fin de la Seconde Guerre mondiale.